The Galactic Council's Xenobiology Department had studied thousands of species across the known galaxy, but nothing had prepared Dr. Zethkar for the peculiar sight before him. The human specimen stood motionless in the examination chamber, wearing what appeared to be the most inefficient armor design the Valkyrie scientist had ever encountered. Commander Sarah Chun remained perfectly still as alien hands prodded at her tactical vest, their three-fingered appendages tracing the numerous pouches and compartments that covered the dark fabric. The translation device, clipped to her ear, buzzed softly as Dr. Zethkar muttered observations to his floating recorder. Fascinating. The protective plating appears segmented into dozens of small sections, the doctor noted, his large compound eyes reflecting the sterile white light of the examination room. Each segment seems deliberately weakened by seams and openings. Most curious design philosophy. Sarah bit back a laugh. 3 weeks ago, her unit had been conducting routine patrol exercises near the Kepler 442 system when their ship encountered the massive Galactic Council research vessel. First contact protocols had been activated, leading to this awkward cultural exchange. The aliens were peaceful enough, more interested in studying human physiology and equipment than establishing trade routes or territorial agreements. The examination room's walls displayed holographic readouts in symbols Sarah couldn't understand, but she could see her vital signs being monitored by at least 6 different scanning devices. Dr. Zethkar continued his inspection, occasionally consulting with his assistant, a slug-like creature whose skin changed colors as it spoke in rapid chirps and whistles. Dr. Yilmoth suggests the armor's poor design might explain why humans engage in such reckless combat behavior, Zethkar announced, his translator rendering his words in crisp English. Perhaps they simply accept higher casualty rates due to inadequate protection. Sarah couldn't help herself this time. A small snort of amusement escaped before she could stop it. The alien doctor's eye stalks swiveled toward her face with mechanical precision. You find our analysis humorous, Specimen Chun? It's Commander Chun. And, yes, a little, Sarah replied, maintaining her professional tone despite the absurdity of the situation. Your assumption about the vest is understandable, but incorrect. Dr. Zethkar's assistant began flickering through a rapid sequence of orange and purple hues, which Sarah had learned indicated confusion or excitement. The main researcher leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly of copper and ozone. Incorrect? Our scanners indicate minimal impact resistance. The material would barely deflect a standard projectile weapon, let alone energy discharge. How does this provide adequate protection for a species that has documented conflicts on over 47 different worlds? Sarah glanced toward the observation window, where Captain Rodriguez and 2 other officers watched the proceedings. They had agreed to be as cooperative as possible with the alien scientists, but certain operational details remained classified. Still, the basic function of a load-bearing vest wasn't exactly a military secret. Doctor, may I ask what your species typically uses for personal protection in combat situations? Zethkar gestured toward a display screen that materialized in the air between them. Images of various alien soldiers appeared, each encased in bulky, seamless armor that covered their bodies from head to toe like metallic shells. Standard combat protection incorporates full-body shielding with integrated life support and weapon systems, he explained proudly. A warrior enters battle as a self-contained unit, carrying everything necessary for extended engagement within the armor's internal storage systems. The alien armor designs looked impressive, but cumbersome. Sarah could see immediately why her tactical vest would confuse them. Where their soldiers resembled walking tanks, human infantry looked almost naked by comparison. Our approach to combat gear evolved differently, Sarah began, carefully choosing her words. What you're examining isn't primarily armor. It's a load-bearing system designed for mobility and ammunition storage. Dr. Yilmoth's color shifted to a bright yellow, and it began chattering rapidly at its colleague. Zethkar's compound eyes widened slightly, the equivalent of raised eyebrows for his species. Ammunition storage? You carry additional projectiles externally? The concept seemed to genuinely shock him. But that would require, how many additional rounds does this system accommodate? Sarah looked down at her vest, mentally counting the loaded magazines in each pouch. In this configuration, about 300 rounds for my primary weapon, plus additional ammunition for secondary systems, grenades, medical supplies, communication equipment, and various other necessities. The silence that followed was profound. Even the ambient humming of the ship's systems seemed to quiet as the aliens processed this information. Dr. Zethkar slowly circled around Sarah, viewing her gear from multiple angles as if seeing it for the first time. 300 projectiles, he repeated slowly, carried externally, available for immediate use. His voice held a note of something that might have been awe or horror. How many projectiles does a typical human soldier expend in combat? This was entering dangerous territory. Sarah glanced again toward the observation window, catching Captain Rodriguez's subtle nod of approval. That depends on the situation, Doctor. But human military doctrine emphasizes sustained fire capability and rapid ammunition resupply. We don't rely solely on armor for protection. Dr. Yilmaz had shifted to a deep purple color and was now making urgent clicking sounds. Zethkar listened intently before turning back to Sarah with what she was learning to recognize as intense curiosity. My colleague raises an interesting point. If this equipment prioritizes ammunition capacity over protection, it suggests your species approaches combat with a fundamentally different philosophy than any we have previously encountered. Sarah nodded slowly. We've found that mobility, firepower, and tactical flexibility often provide better survivability than heavy armor alone. The alien doctor activated several more scanning devices, their soft beeping filling the examination chamber. Holographic displays showed detailed scans of every pouch and compartment on Sarah's vest, each one highlighting the ammunition and equipment stored within. Remarkable, Zethkar murmured. Your entire torso is essentially a mobile ammunition depot. And this is standard equipment for individual soldiers? For infantry, yes. Other specializations use different loadouts, but the principle remains the same. Carry what you need, stay mobile, complete the mission. Dr. Zethkar exchanged more rapid communication with his assistant before addressing Sarah again. Commander, would you be willing to demonstrate how quickly you can access and utilize this stored ammunition? For purely scientific purposes, of course. Sarah considered the request. The aliens had been nothing but professional throughout the exchange process, and their scientific curiosity seemed genuine. Still, she needed to be careful about revealing too much tactical information. I can show you basic ammunition handling procedures, she agreed. But I'll need my weapon returned for the demonstration. The alien doctor's eye stalks swiveled toward the observation window, where Captain Rodriguez was already nodding his approval. Within minutes, a sealed container was brought into the examination chamber, containing Sarah's service rifle in a completely unloaded state. As Sarah began the demonstration of tactical reloading procedures, she noticed more aliens gathering at the observation windows. Word was apparently spreading throughout the research vessel that the humans had brought something unexpected to study. What they were about to learn would fundamentally change the Galactic Council's understanding of human warfare, though none of them realized it yet. Sarah's simple tactical vest was about to become the most studied piece of equipment in a known galaxy. The demonstration began simply enough. Sarah held her unloaded rifle and explained the basic mechanics to Dr. Zethkar and the growing crowd of alien observers. The weapon itself was unremarkable by human standards, a reliable infantry rifle designed for versatility and ease of maintenance in field conditions. Standard magazine capacity is 30 rounds, Sarah explained, pulling an empty magazine from one of her vest pouches. Reload time for a trained soldier is approximately 2 to 3 seconds under normal conditions. She inserted the magazine with a sharp click, then demonstrated the charging handle operation. The aliens watched with rapt attention as she showed them the safety mechanisms and basic firing positions, all with an empty weapon under carefully controlled conditions. Dr. Zethkar activated his recording device again. The weapon appears relatively simple compared to our integrated energy systems. How does its effectiveness compare to standard galactic armaments? Sarah considered her answer carefully. Different design philosophy, Doctor. Our weapons prioritize reliability, simplicity, and ammunition availability. Chemical propellant systems are easier to manufacture and maintain than energy weapons, especially in extended field operations. Dr. Yilmaz flickered through several color changes before speaking in its musical language. Zethkar listened, then translated for Sarah's benefit. My colleague points out that your magazine capacity seems quite limited. Our energy weapons can typically discharge 40 to 50 shots before requiring power cell replacement. Why not simply carry larger magazines? The question revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of human tactics that Sarah decided to address directly. May I show you something, Doctor? At his nod, Sarah reached into her vest and began pulling out magazines. She set them on the examination table in a neat row, 6 30-round magazines from her primary pouches, plus 2 more from her belt. The aliens watched in fascination as the display grew. 8 magazines total, Sarah announced. 240 rounds for my primary weapon. But that's not including the ammunition for secondary systems. She pulled out her sidearm magazines, grenade launcher rounds, and even the small boxes of loose ammunition stored in her utility pouches. The examination table quickly filled with more firepower than most alien soldiers carried in their integrated armor systems. The observation room had grown crowded. Sarah could see at least a dozen different species pressed against the windows, their various appendages and sensory organs focused intently on the demonstration. Several were speaking rapidly into communication devices, apparently reporting their observations to colleagues elsewhere on the ship. 240 rounds, Dr. Zethkar repeated, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. Plus additional ammunition for secondary weapons. And this is carried by a single individual soldier. In this configuration, yes. But loadouts can be adjusted based on mission requirements. Some specialists carry significantly more ammunition, while others prioritize different equipment based on their role. Dr. Yilmaz's skin had shifted to a deep red color, which Sarah had learned indicated either anger or extreme concern. It chittered urgently at Dr. Zethkar, who nodded gravely before turning back to Sarah. Commander, my colleague raises a disturbing question. If individual human soldiers carry this much ammunition, how much does a typical human military unit carry collectively? Sarah paused, realizing she was venturing into sensitive territory. The actual logistics of human military operations would probably seem absolutely insane to species that relied on energy weapons and integrated armor systems. A standard infantry squad consists of 9 soldiers, she said carefully. Each carries a different loadout based on their specialization, but collectively, she did some quick mental math. Probably around 2,000 rounds of small arms ammunition, plus crew-served weapons, explosives, and other specialized equipment. The silence that followed was even more profound than before. Sarah could see alien faces, or what she assumed were faces, pressed against every available viewing surface. Some species she couldn't even identify, their forms too alien for her to interpret their expressions. Dr. Zethkar slowly walked around the table, examining the displayed ammunition with the care of someone handling unstable explosives. 2,000 projectiles, carried by 9 individuals, available for immediate use in combat. That's a conservative estimate for a basic patrol loadout, Sarah added. Combat missions would carry significantly more. Dr. Yilmaz had turned a color Sarah had never seen before, a sort of pulsing orange that seemed to indicate extreme agitation. It began making rapid, high-pitched sounds that her translator couldn't process properly. My colleague is concerned, Dr. Zethkar said diplomatically. In our experience, most species require extensive logistical support to deliver large quantities of ammunition to a combat zone. The idea of individual soldiers carrying such quantities independently suggests a very different approach to warfare. Sarah was beginning to understand the source of their concern. Doctor, may I ask about typical engagement durations for galactic conflicts? Most armed conflicts are resolved within minutes once combat begins, Zethkar explained. Energy weapons, heavy armor, and limited ammunition supplies naturally limit the duration of fighting. Extended conflicts lasting more than an hour are extremely rare. The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind. These aliens were used to short, decisive engagements where superior technology and heavy protection determined outcomes quickly. The idea of sustained combat lasting hours or days with massive ammunition expenditure was completely outside their experience. Human conflicts tend to be more prolonged, Sarah said carefully. Our equipment is designed for extended operations with minimal resupply. Dr. Zethkar activated several more scanning devices, apparently taking detailed measurements of every round on the table. Commander, how long might a typical human engagement last? Sarah thought about the various conflicts in human history, from brief skirmishes to siege warfare lasting months. It varies considerably. Some engagements last minutes. Others can continue for days or weeks depending on the strategic situation. The alien's compound eyes seem to dilate slightly. Days? You engage in combat lasting multiple days. When necessary, yes. Human military doctrine emphasizes persistence and adaptability. We fight until objectives are achieved or the situation becomes untenable. Dr. Yilmoth had begun making sounds that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of distress calls. Other aliens in the observation room were engaged in what appeared to be urgent discussions, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, lights, and color changes. This explains much about human expansion patterns, Dr. Zethkar murmured, almost to himself. Your species has been observed in conflicts across multiple systems, often against seemingly superior forces. We assumed this was due to reckless behavior or poor tactical planning. We prefer to think of it as determination, Sarah replied with a slight smile. The alien doctor began pacing around the examination chamber, his movements quick and agitated. Commander, I must ask directly, what is the maximum amount of ammunition a human soldier has been known to carry in extreme circumstances? Sarah hesitated. Some of the stories from prolonged campaigns would probably sound like fantasy to these aliens. I've heard of specialists carrying over 1,000 rounds in extreme situations, but that's not typical. Dr. Zethkar stopped pacing and stared at her. 1,000 projectiles, carried by a single individual, plus explosives, medical supplies, communication equipment, food, water, and other necessities for extended operations, Sarah added, then immediately realized she probably shouldn't have mentioned the explosives. The observation room had erupted into chaos. Aliens were gesturing frantically at each other, their various forms of communication blending into an incomprehensible din. Several species seemed to be evacuating the area entirely, while others pressed closer to the windows with what appeared to be morbid fascination. Dr. Yilmoth had turned a color so bright it was almost painful to look at, and the sound it was making were definitely distress calls. Dr. Zethkar attempted to calm his colleague while continuing to stare at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. Commander, he said slowly, I believe we need to expand this examination significantly. The Galactic Council needs to understand exactly what kind of species humanity represents. News of the human examination spread through the Galactic Council research vessel like a quantum pulse through subspace. Within hours, the modest xenobiology lab had been transformed into an emergency conference center, packed with representatives from dozens of species. Sarah found herself at the center of what appeared to be the most urgent scientific gathering in recent galactic history. Admiral Keth Mori of the Hegemony Defense Fleet had arrived via emergency transport, her crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the chamber's lights in prismatic patterns. The insectoid admiral commanded respect from every species present. Her military record included successful campaigns against the notorious Void Raiders and the suppression of 3 separate rebellion attempts in the outer systems. Dr. Zethkar, the admiral's voice resonated with harmonics that made Sarah's bones vibrate, Your preliminary report suggests these humans represent a previously unknown classification of warfare capability. Explain. The nervous scientist activated the chamber's main display, showing detailed scans of Sarah's tactical vest alongside comparison images of standard galactic military equipment. The difference was stark. Where alien soldiers wore bulky, enclosed armor systems, human gear appeared almost primitive by comparison. Admiral, we initially assumed this was poorly designed protective equipment, Zethkar began, his confidence returning as he entered full academic mode. However, further investigation reveals it serves an entirely different purpose. The human specimen, Commander Chun, Sarah interrupted politely but firmly. Commander Chun carries approximately 300 projectile rounds in external storage pouches, designed for rapid access and deployment during extended combat operations. Admiral Kethmori's antenna twitched, a sign of intense concentration in her species. Extended operations? Define extended. Dr. Zethkar consulted his notes nervously. According to Commander Chun, human military engagements can last multiple days. Individual soldiers are equipped to operate independently for extended periods without resupply. The chamber erupted in a dozen different forms of communication as representatives from various species expressed shock, disbelief, or concern. Sarah watched the chaos with professional detachment, noting how different species reacted to stress. Some became more animated, others completely still, and a few seemed to be releasing various chemical signals that made the air thick with unfamiliar scents. Admiral Kethmori raised one of her primary manipulator arms, and the chamber fell silent immediately. Her species' reputation for decisive leadership was well earned across the galaxy. Commander Chun, she addressed Sarah directly. Are these claims accurate? Do human soldiers routinely engage in combat, lasting multiple planetary rotations? Sarah chose her words carefully. Yes, Admiral. Human military doctrine emphasizes sustained operations capability. Our soldiers are trained and equipped to maintain combat effectiveness for extended periods. And this ammunition capacity allows for sustained projectile weapon fire during these extended periods? Among other factors, yes. Ammunition management is a critical skill for human infantry. The Admiral's crystalline features seemed to shift slightly, light refracting differently through her exoskeleton as internal pressures changed. Demonstrate the rate of fire these weapons can achieve. Sarah looked toward the observation window, where Captain Rodriguez was consulting frantically with his communication officer. After a moment, he activated the intercom system. Commander Chun, you are authorized to provide basic performance parameters for standard infantry weapons. Nothing classified. Sarah nodded and turned back to Admiral Kethmori. A trained soldier can maintain approximately 60 to 90 aimed rounds per minute with this weapon system, depending on conditions and accuracy requirements. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ship's environmental systems seemed to quiet as the implications sank in. Dr. Yilmaz had shifted to a color so pale it was almost transparent, while several other species displayed what Sarah was learning to recognize as extreme agitation. 90 projectiles per minute, Admiral Kethmori repeated slowly, sustained over multiple days, with 300 rounds carried per individual. That's for aimed fire, Sarah clarified, perhaps unwisely. Suppressive fire rates can be significantly higher. A new voice entered the conversation, deep, resonant, and carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. General Thakmar of the Unified Defense Corps had arrived, his massive form requiring the chamber's doorway to be expanded to accommodate his entry. The reptilian general stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scale hide bearing the scars of countless battles. His species, the Corvani, were considered among the most formidable warriors in the galaxy, their natural armor and immense strength making them ideal heavy assault troops. Human, General Thakmar's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. Your claims strain credibility. No species maintains combat capability for extended periods without massive logistical support. Sarah met the general's gaze steadily, despite the intimidating presence he projected. General, human military operations emphasize logistical independence and individual soldier capability. Our equipment reflects this philosophy. Demonstrate, Thakmar commanded simply. Sarah looked questioningly toward Admiral Kethmori, who considered briefly before nodding approval. A limited demonstration of equipment capabilities would be educational. Dr. Zethkar hurriedly cleared additional space while Sarah began laying out her gear in organized patterns on the examination table. She moved with practiced efficiency, each piece of equipment placed precisely where it would be most accessible during actual operations. Standard infantry loadout includes primary weapon, secondary weapon, medical supplies, communication equipment, navigation tools, emergency rations, water purification tablets, shelter materials, and various mission-specific items, Sarah explained as she worked. Everything needed for independent operation. The assembled aliens watched in fascination as the display grew. Sarah pulled items from pouches that had seemed barely large enough to contain them. Compact medical kits that expanded into comprehensive field surgical supplies, ration packets that would provide days of sustenance, communication devices that could coordinate with forces across multiple star systems. General Thakmar examined the medical kit closely, his massive claws delicately manipulating the tiny instruments. These medical supplies, they're sufficient for treating combat injuries. Basic trauma stabilization, yes. Human soldiers receive extensive medical training to treat themselves and their teammates until proper medical evacuation is available. Medical evacuation? Admiral Kethmori interjected. You assume medical support will be available during these extended operations? Sarah realized she was revealing more about human military capability than intended, but Captain Rodriguez's continued approval indicated these revelations were acceptable. When possible, yes. But human soldiers are trained to operate under the assumption that formal support may not be available for extended periods. Dr. Yilmaz made a sound that the translator couldn't process, then shifted to a deep purple color before speaking in rapid, agitated tones. Dr. Zethkar listened intently before translating. My colleague asks about casualty rates during these extended operations. If individual soldiers carry such extensive supplies and ammunition, it suggests expectations of significant combat losses. Sarah felt a chill as she realized what the aliens were actually asking. They weren't just curious about human equipment. They were trying to understand what kind of species would design military doctrine around the assumption of heavy casualties and extended, unsupported combat operations. Human military planning includes contingencies for various casualty scenarios, she answered carefully. Our equipment and training emphasize unit cohesion and mission completion despite losses. General Thakmar's scarred features shifted into what might have been a grimace of respect or concern. Your species plans for battle continuation despite significant losses to individual units? Human history includes numerous examples of small units continuing operations despite heavy casualties, Sarah confirmed. Adaptability and determination are considered essential military virtues. The chamber fell silent again as the assembled aliens processed this information. Sarah could see various species engaging in urgent, whispered consultations, their body language suggesting deep concern about what they were learning. Admiral Kethmori finally spoke, her harmonics carrying a note Sarah hadn't heard before, something that might have been wariness or even fear. Commander Chun, I believe the Galactic Council needs to understand far more about human military capability than we initially realized. This examination will continue, but with expanded scope and additional observers. Sarah nodded, though she was beginning to wonder exactly what she was revealing about her species. The aliens' reaction suggested that human military doctrine was more unusual than she had realized. What worried her most was the growing realization that they weren't just studying human equipment. They were trying to understand whether humanity represented a threat to galactic peace. And, based on their reaction so far, they weren't liking what they were learning. The examination had evolved into something far beyond scientific curiosity. Sarah now found herself standing before the emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council, surrounded by the most powerful military minds from across known space. The massive amphitheater aboard the Council's flagship could accommodate representatives from hundreds of species, and nearly every seat was filled. Fleet Admiral Zarathul presided over the assembly from her position at the chamber's apex. The ancient ethereal's form shifted between states of matter as her emotions fluctuated, sometimes appearing as solid crystal, other times as flowing energy contained within a vaguely humanoid outline. Her species had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of galactic civilizations, and their perspective on military matters was considered nearly infallible. "We are gathered to assess potential implications of human military capability," Admiral Zarathul announced. Her voice transmitted directly into the minds of all present through psychic resonance. Initial examinations suggest warfare doctrines previously unknown to galactic civilization. Sarah stood on a raised platform at the chamber's center, still wearing her tactical vest, which had become the focus of intense scrutiny from across the galaxy. Captain Rodriguez sat in the human delegation area, flanked by diplomatic attaches who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the session progressed. General Thakmar rose from his position among the Corvani delegation, his massive form commanding immediate attention. "Fleet Admiral, preliminary analysis of human equipment suggests individual soldiers carry more projectile ammunition than entire Corvani assault squads. If accurate, this indicates military production capabilities of staggering proportions." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, lights, and chemical signals as hundreds of species attempted to process this information simultaneously. Sarah had learned to read some of the common emotional displays, the rapid color changes indicating shock, the subsonic vibrations suggesting concern, and the chemical releases that her suit's sensors identified as various stress pheromones. "Order," Fleet Admiral Zarathul commanded, her psychic voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The chamber fell silent instantly. "General Thakmar, explain your analysis." The massive reptilian activated a holographic display showing detailed scans of Sarah's ammunition loadout alongside comparative data from various galactic military forces. The numbers were stark. Sarah's individual load exceeded the ammunition carried by most alien squad-level units. If each human soldier carries 300 projectiles, and humans field military forces numbering in the millions, Thakmar continued, the total ammunition production requirements suggest an industrial capacity dedicated primarily to warfare preparation. Sarah felt compelled to respond. "General, human industrial capacity serves many purposes. Military production represents only a fraction of our total manufacturing capability." The statement sent another wave of agitation through the assembly. Admiral Keth Mori stood to address the chamber. "Commander Chun suggests their ammunition production is incidental to primary industrial capacity. This implies manufacturing capabilities far exceeding established galactic norms." Dr. Zethkar activated another display showing human industrial statistics that had been compiled from various sources during their journey to the Council flagship. The numbers painted a picture of production capacity that dwarfed most individual galactic civilizations. Preliminary analysis indicates humans produce more chemical explosives annually than the combined output of 17 major galactic civilizations, he reported nervously. This includes both military and civilian applications. A new voice entered the discussion, crisp, mechanical, and utterly without emotion. Chief Analyst Unit Prime of the Synthetic Collective had accessed the Chamber's communication systems directly, its artificial consciousness interfacing with the ship's computers to project its thoughts. Query: Human industrial capacity allocation. Request clarification on percentage of total production dedicated to military applications versus civilian infrastructure. Sarah considered the question carefully. The actual numbers would probably be reassuring to the alien assembly, but she needed to be accurate. Approximately 3 to 5% of human industrial output is dedicated to military applications during peacetime, she answered. This percentage increases during active conflicts, but civilian production always maintains priority. The silence that followed was profound. Unit Prime's mechanical voice cut through the quiet with mathematical precision. Analysis: if current ammunition production represents only a fraction of total capacity, maximum theoretical military production exceeds projected requirements for subduing entire galactic sectors. Conclusion: humans represent existential threat to galactic civilization. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began speaking simultaneously, their various forms of communication creating an overwhelming din of sound, light, and chemical signals. Some delegations appeared to be demanding immediate military action, while others seemed to be calling for diplomatic solutions. Fleet Admiral Zarathal's form shifted to pure energy as her emotional state intensified. "Silence," she commanded, her psychic voice resonating with such power that several smaller species physically recoiled from the mental pressure. Order restored. She addressed Sarah directly. "Commander Chun, Chief Analyst Unit Prime's assessment suggests your species possesses the capability to wage war on a galactic scale. How do you respond to this analysis?" Sarah felt the weight of representing her entire species in that moment. Every word could potentially determine whether humanity was welcomed into galactic civilization or marked for immediate elimination. "Fleet Admiral, humans have no desire for galactic conquest. Our military capabilities developed in response to conflicts within our own solar system and the need for defense against unknown threats. We seek peaceful coexistence and mutual cooperation." General Thakmar's scarred features twisted into what Sarah had learned was an expression of skepticism. "Your protestations of peaceful intent are undermined by military preparations that suggest otherwise. Why would a peaceful species develop such extensive warfare capabilities?" The question struck at the heart of human nature in ways that would be difficult to explain to species that had never experienced global conflicts or existential threats from within their own civilizations. "General, humans developed these capabilities because we learned that peace must be defended," Sarah answered carefully. "Our history includes numerous conflicts that threatened our civilization's survival. We prepare for war to preserve peace." Admiral Kethmori activated her own display, showing analysis of human expansion patterns and defensive installations throughout their solar system. "Your defensive preparations suggest expectations of significant external threats. What enemies do humans anticipate facing?" Sarah realized she was about to reveal something that might be even more disturbing to the galactic community than human military capability: the fact that humans had developed their entire military doctrine without knowing what threats existed in the broader galaxy. "We developed our military capabilities before establishing contact with galactic civilization," she admitted. "Our preparations were designed to defend against unknown threats from space." The implications sent another shockwave through the assembly. Dr. Yilmoth had turned a color so bright it was painful to look at directly, while several other species displayed what appeared to be extreme agitation or fear. Unit Prime's mechanical voice cut through the rising noise. Analysis: humans developed galaxy-level military capabilities to defend against hypothetical threats. Conclusion: human threat assessment protocols exceed rational parameters. Secondary conclusion: humans will interpret any action against them as validating their threat assumptions. Fleet Admiral Zarathal's energy form fluctuated rapidly as she processed the artificial intelligence's assessment. Sarah could see her own death warrant being written in real time as the galactic community realized they were dealing with a species that had prepared for war against enemies that didn't exist. "Commander Chun," the fleet admiral said slowly, "you are suggesting that humans developed extensive military capabilities to defend against imaginary threats." "Not imaginary," Sarah corrected firmly. "Unknown. Humans learned that survival requires preparation for scenarios beyond current understanding. We developed capabilities to face whatever challenges the universe might present. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien minds struggled to comprehend a species that would prepare for war against the entire unknown universe. Sarah realized that humans had just revealed themselves to be either the most paranoid species in galactic history or the most prepared. She was beginning to suspect the distinction might not matter to the beings deciding her species' fate. The debate had raged for hours across the Galactic Defense Council chamber. Species that had maintained peace for millennia found themselves confronting the reality of a civilization that had weaponized paranoia into a defensive doctrine capable of challenging the entire galaxy. Sarah stood at the center of the storm, her simple tactical vest having inadvertently revealed humanity's true nature to the universe. Fleet Admiral Zarathul had called for recess 3 times as various delegations demanded private consultations. Now, as the emergency session reconvened, Sarah could see the results of those hurried discussions in the posture and positioning of the alien representatives. Clear faction lines had emerged. Some species advocated for immediate preemptive action against humanity, while others pushed for cautious engagement or complete avoidance. The faction demanding military action was led by the Hegemon Defense Fleet, their crystalline Admiral Keth Mori serving as spokesperson for nearly 40 species that viewed human military capability as an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. They had spent the recess calculating theoretical scenarios where human expansion could destabilize entire sectors through superior firepower and sustained combat capability. Opposing them was an unlikely alliance of scientific species and trade confederations, led by the enigmatic Dr. Zethkar and supported by representatives from the merchant guilds. They argued that human military capability, while concerning, represented potential assets rather than inevitable threats. Their calculations focused on the economic and defensive benefits of alliance with a species capable of such extensive warfare preparation. Chief Analyst Unit Prime of the Synthetic Collective maintained its own position, analyzing human capabilities through pure mathematical models that treated emotional considerations as irrelevant variables. Its conclusions were stark. Humans represented either the galaxy's greatest threat or its most valuable defensive asset, depending entirely on their true intentions. Fleet Admiral Zarathul's energy form had stabilized into a crystalline configuration that reflected her species' decision-making mode. When ethereals assumed this form, it indicated they were accessing the collective wisdom of their ancestors, drawing on thousands of years of experience to guide critical decisions. The Council recognizes Representative Veldar of the Pacifist Union, she announced formally. A graceful, almost translucent being rose from the scientific delegation. The Veltai were renowned across the galaxy for their philosophical approach to conflict resolution, having successfully mediated disputes between species for over 10,000 years. Honored Fleet Admiral, esteemed colleagues, Veldar began, its voice carrying harmonics that naturally calmed aggressive impulses in most species. We face a fundamental question about the nature of strength and intention. The human representative has demonstrated capabilities that exceed our experience, but capabilities alone do not determine threat level. The representative gestured towards Sarah with movements that seemed to flow like liquid light. Commander Chun, you have revealed that humans prepare for unknown threats. This suggests a species driven by fear, but also by remarkable foresight and determination. Tell us, in your species' history, have these preparations ever been used for conquest rather than defense? Sarah felt the weight of the question. The honest answer was complicated. Human history included countless examples of aggressive warfare, territorial expansion, and conflicts driven by resources or ideology. But it also demonstrated humanity's capacity to evolve beyond its violent tendencies. Representative Veldar, humans have a complex military history that includes both aggressive and defensive actions, Sarah answered truthfully. However, our current military doctrine emphasizes defense of human territory and protection of allied forces. We do not seek to conquer other civilizations. General Thakmar's scarred features twisted into obvious skepticism. Your current intentions may be peaceful, but capabilities create opportunities. A species prepared for galactic warfare will inevitably find reasons to utilize those capabilities. Sarah straightened, drawing on her training to project confidence despite the overwhelming circumstances. General, humans have possessed the capability to destroy our own planet for centuries. We have chosen not to use that capability. Our restraint in the face of ultimate power demonstrates our commitment to peaceful coexistence. The statement sent another wave of shock through the assembly. Several species began urgent consultations as they processed the implications. Humans had developed planet-killing weapons and chosen not to use them, even during internal conflicts. Unit Prime's mechanical voice cut through the rising discussion. Query: clarification required. Humans possess planet-scale destructive capability and have exercised restraint in deployment. Request elaboration on decision-making processes that prevented utilization. Sarah realized she was about to reveal something that might be even more important than human military capability: the existence of human moral and ethical frameworks that constrain the use of power. Humans developed extensive ethical and legal frameworks to govern the use of destructive capabilities, she explained. Our species learned that possessing power creates responsibility to use it wisely. We have international laws, military codes of conduct, and civilian oversight systems that prevent abuse of force. Dr. Zethkar activated his recording device, apparently realizing this information was critically important. Commander, are you stating that humans have voluntary limitations on the use of military force? Self-imposed restrictions that prevent maximum utilization of available capabilities? Yes, Doctor. Human military doctrine includes extensive rules of engagement, protection for civilian populations, and legal frameworks that hold individual soldiers accountable for their actions. We believe that unlimited warfare ultimately destroys what you're trying to protect. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien minds struggled to comprehend a species that would voluntarily limit its own military effectiveness for moral reasons. Most galactic civilizations had developed technological limitations or natural behavioral constraints that prevented excessive warfare. Humans had apparently developed philosophical limitations instead. Fleet Admiral Zarathal's crystalline form began rotating slowly, a sign of deep contemplation among her species. Commander Chun, you describe a species that has developed galaxy-level military capabilities, then created voluntary restrictions on their use. This suggests a level of self-awareness and ethical development that is unprecedented. Representative Veldhar's harmonics shifted to frequencies associated with wonder and hope. If humans have truly mastered the balance between capability and restraint, they may represent something the galaxy has never seen: a warrior species governed by wisdom rather than aggression. General Thakmar remained skeptical. Philosophical restraints can be abandoned when circumstances change. What guarantee exists that human moral frameworks will persist during actual conflicts? Sarah considered the question carefully. Human history provided examples of both moral courage and ethical failures during wartime, but also demonstrated humanity's capacity to learn from mistakes and strengthen moral frameworks over time. General, humans have fought numerous conflicts while maintaining ethical standards. We have made mistakes and learned from them. Our moral frameworks have grown stronger over time, not weaker. We believe that victory without honor is ultimately defeat. Unit Prime processed this statement through its analytical matrices before responding. Analysis: human moral frameworks appear to strengthen under stress rather than deteriorate. This suggests embedded cultural mechanisms that prioritize ethical behavior even during existential threats. Conclusion: humans may represent stable alliance partners rather than inevitable threats. The artificial intelligence's assessment seemed to shift the mood in the chamber. Several delegations that had been advocating for preemptive action began engaging in quiet discussions, apparently reconsidering their positions. Admiral Kethmori rose to address the assembly, her crystalline features reflecting uncertainty for the first time. If Chief Analyst Unit Prime's assessment is accurate, we may be facing an opportunity rather than a threat. A species with extensive military capability governed by strong ethical frameworks could provide defensive capabilities the galaxy has never possessed. Fleet Admiral Zarathal's rotation slowed as she approached a decision. The Council faces an unprecedented situation. We have encountered a species that challenges our understanding of the relationship between military capability and aggressive intent. She paused, her ancient consciousness accessing millennia of experience and wisdom. Commander Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Defense Council, I extend an invitation for formal diplomatic negotiations between humanity and galactic civilization. Your species will be monitored carefully, but we choose engagement over elimination. Sarah felt a wave of relief so profound it made her knees weak. Fleet Admiral, humanity accepts your invitation with gratitude. We look forward to peaceful cooperation and mutual defense against common threats. Representative Veldhar's harmonics shifted to frequencies associated with joy and hope. Perhaps the galaxy has found not a threat, but its most capable defender, a species prepared for any war, but wise enough to choose peace. As the assembly began to disperse, Sarah realized that her simple tactical vest had done more than reveal human military capability. It had forced the galaxy to confront fundamental questions about the relationship between power and responsibility, capability, and intention. Humans have been preparing for unknown threats their entire history. Now they had found not enemies, but allies who valued strength tempered by wisdom. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity's place in it. Dr. Zethkar approached Sarah as the chamber emptied. Commander, I believe your tactical vest will be studied for generations to come. Not just for its technical capabilities, but for what it revealed about human character. Sarah smiled, finally, able to relax after hours of representing her entire species. Doctor, it's just a vest with extra pockets for rounds. The real revelation was that humans are exactly what we appear to be, prepared for anything but hoping for peace. As they walked toward the diplomatic quarters where formal negotiations would begin, Sarah reflected on the day's events. Humans had entered the galaxy as unknowns and emerged as respected potential allies, not because they were peaceful, but because they were warriors who had chosen peace. The universe was vast and full of unknown threats. For the first time in galactic history, civilization had found defenders who were prepared for all of them.